Family, when the president of the United States, Donald Trump, made this comment.
You say, why is it we only take people from shithole countries? We always take people from Somalia, places that are a disaster, right? Filthy, dirty, disgusting, ridden with crime. I've also announced a permanent pause on third world migration, including from hellholes like Afghanistan, Haiti, Somalia, and many other countries. I don't want them in our country. Their country's no good for a reason. Their country stinks, and we don't want them in our country. Do we have any individuals from Somalia in the group? Please raise your hand. I love this Ilan Omar, whatever the hell her name is, with the little turban. I love her. She comes in, there's nothing but bitch. She's always complaining.
We spoke about this comment and we asked questions. Why African leaders are quiet? We spoke about it, but we didn't hear any African leader trying to defend Africans when these comments and these words are used against African countries and individuals because they come from Africa. So we asked the questions. Somebody like me, I asked why African Union should be silenced over things like this. Somebody needs to be defending us. That is why they are leaders for. They are leading us. So if our image is being tarnished and we have been insulted, they should be able to come to our defense. But little did we know, the president of Ghana has decided not to let this one go off way. Not knowing the president of Ghana was looking for opportunity to handle and tackle this issue. The president of Ghana, John Dramani Mahama, at the Diaspora Summit, which was held on 19th December in Accra, the president took the platform and used it properly. He handled these issues. He decided not to let these comments pass by without addressing them. He decided to school all Europeans, including anybody involved in this type of comment. He went further to point Africans to the future by referring us to the past to understand that we need to be more intentional about our unity than the people who divided us were intentional about our division. A strong statement. Family, let me leave you to watch the video and conclude yourself. This man is standing for Africans. Just as the comment of Donald Trump went viral, let's make the speech of the president of Ghana viral so that it can reach everybody to understand that there are leaders in Africa who still care for the African people. So it is left for you to hit the like button and share so we make it viral. If we can get highest like on this video, we can make it viral. Thank you so much.
We're at a place in our journey where we do not have the luxury of forgetting. When government officials can so easily use the words like garbage and filth to describe our kith and kin, when they can refer to our countries as shitholes, when they can indiscriminately strip people who look like us of citizenship that they have earned, we do not have the luxury of forgetting or of either excusing the racist dog whistles or explaining the overtly discriminatory and divisive statements that are made daily to our hearing. We have been divided with artificial borders of colonialism that split ethnic homelands right down the middle, with half of our communities being ruled by one European country and the other half being ruled by another. And with the labeling of our ethnicity in a colony as intellectual and worthy of education, while another ethnicity was said to be inherently martial and thus intellectually inferior. We've been divided by the manufacturing of coups, armed conflicts, anti-poverty programs that somehow never eradicate poverty, by the selective broadcast of stereotypes, a systemic war of images waged against us, images meant to foster fear and engender self-hatred and portrayal of Africans as primitive savages, whose low cognitive ability makes them incapable of self-determination, and Black people in the Americas as lazy, drug-addled, and criminally inclined. And there too is the institutionalization of colorism, The belief that anything black is negative or inferior, and the proximity to whiteness is more desirable. It is reflected in every aspect of our lives. And I say us because colonization did not leave us unscathed, quite the opposite. In English, everything negative and evil is black. In Spanish, la negra means black woman. Tener la negra means to have bad luck or to be jinxed. A once popular French expression that went out of vogue but has recently been making a comeback is travailler comme un nègre. Travailler comme un nègre, which means to work like a slave. And it's often also translated with the word slave being replaced by a more offensive racial slur. But anything in this life, once stripped of its power, will no longer work. And that is true of slurs, it is true of stories, especially ones that are complete fabrications. Let's take the narrative of those who oppressed us and work it. In fact, let's take their entire modus operandi and flip it and reverse it. And so I urge you, my brothers and sisters, let's be more intentional about our unity than they were about our division. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, our brothers and sisters from the 17th region of Ghana, it will not be a difficult goal to achieve. No matter how we've been divided, we've always tried to find our way back to one another. Africans in the diaspora whose forebears were enslaved have kept us in their rhythms. The music they play, the dances, the cadence of their speech, and even the language. The Gula Geechee people of the United States still count using Fulani words instead of numerals. Yoruba language is spoken in Venezuela, in Cuba, in Brazil, Haiti, and Trinidad and Tobago. Likewise, a Creole offspring of Akan is spoken by the Africans, the Maroons in Jamaica and in Suriname. And Africa remains in our food. America gumbo and Brazilian karuru bear a strong resemblance to Ghanaian okra stew. All three use okra, also known as okra, which is native to the African continent and was transported to the New World on slave ships, as were cowpeas. We call it gobe here in Ghana for those of you. Try and eat gobe before you go back. Another food item that is native to Africa, which would explain why some variations of Hopping John, a dish from the Gula Geechee people, are so reminiscent of the Ghanaian wache. Try to eat wache too before you go. The ways in which Africa has remained at the heart of its diaspora are far-reaching, well beyond food and music. Perhaps the most important way is in the cultural elements that are taught to our children, ensuring the cord that has tethered these diasporan communities to the African continent all these centuries remains unbroken. There are the Kwekua Nancy folk tales that so many of us in this room grew up hearing and reading, and that have spread all over the world to places too numerous to mention. just like the popular children's call and response folk song that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. Cheche Kule, Cheche Kofisa, Kofisa Langa, Kakati Langa, Kum Adede, Kum Adede. I didn't hear you go. Cheche Kule, Cheche Kule, Kofisa Langa, Kofisa Langa, Lalati Langa, Kum Adede. Thank you. Ghana's first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, said, and that quote has been shown here, "I'm not African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me." Though I have no proof, I suspect that this sentiment was heavily influenced by his time in America, where he completed his undergraduate studies at Lincoln University and his graduate studies at the University of Pennsylvania. He was also a frequent visitor to Harlem, and this was in the late 1930s and 1940s, at a time when most Ghanaian intellectuals were completing their higher education in European universities. During his 8 years in the United States, Nkrumah was able to experience at first hand racism and the Jim Crow laws. Nkrumah was already a believer in Pan-Africanism before he went to the United States. He was a huge fan of Marcus Garvey, whose Black Star Line was an attempt to facilitate movements between North America and Africa, particularly Liberia, where free blacks had been emigrating since the 1820s. The Black Star, which is featured prominently on Ghana's flag, has come to be a defining part of our national identity. It underscored his rallying cry, which was the unity of all African peoples. He wanted the story of the diaspora and the stories of all the other indigenous people who had been colonized on the African continent to be a part of our national story. So much so that at the hour of Ghana's independence, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah famously proclaimed that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent. It was a heady and ambitious statement, and the years that followed were equally as heady and ambitious, full of growth, infrastructural development, and the building of alliances between other newly independent African nations. There was a sense of hope. No, it was more than that. It was an intoxicating feeling of endless possibilities. It was a pure, perhaps naive belief that we could attain our own modern day version of the glory that our forebears like Shaka the Zulu and Mansa Musa had, and that we could build our nation states to be as exemplary as the Mwene Mutepa Empire, Songhai, Mali, and the Ghana empires that had existed before. And then came the coup d'etats, many inspired by the imperial nations, not just in Ghana, but in most of the other nations that had newly gained independence. And then came even more coup d'etats, one after the other, following by the imprisonment and exile of our liberation leaders. We now know as Ghanaians, as author Ama Ataidu wrote, that there are powerful forces undermining our progress in Africa. We suffered decades of brain drain that emptied a sizable portion of the continent's population adding scores of exiles to the diaspora. And our nations themselves were surviving but barely on the remittances that those individuals sent home. It will surprise you to know, in 1990, the total number of Africans who had migrated voluntarily to the United States eclipsed the total number who had been brought as enslaved people to leaving an utterly devastated continent. When it comes to reparative justice, we ask what is just. We're at a very pivotal place in our journey. There are those who will have us go backward, not just 1 or 2 steps, as if that would not be bad enough. They want us to go all the way back. They want us to develop some sort of amnesia about the blood that was spilled, the lives that were lost, and the years that were sacrificed in order to fight for our freedom. We are at a place in our journey where we do not have the luxury of forgetting. When government officials can so easily use the words like garbage and filth to describe our kith and kin, when they can refer to our countries as shitholes, when they can indiscriminately strip people who look like us of citizenship that they have earned, we do not have the luxury of forgetting or of either excusing the racist dog whistles or explaining the overtly discriminatory and divisive statements that are made daily to our hearing. This is precisely the time when we must advance and begin the process of reclamation. This is precisely the time when we must speak loudly and clearly, naming what it is we have lost as well as what it is we hope to gain. Her Excellency Mian Amor Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, a great African sister, said in a lecture at the London School of Economics, the conspiracy of silence has diminished the horror of what our people faced. This year at the UN General Assembly, I served notice that Ghana will move a motion next year to recognize the transatlantic slave trade as the greatest crime against humanity. I know this motion will enjoy the utmost support from the entire African continent and the diaspora. Africa has suffered slavery, colonialism, genocide, and apartheid. We demand acknowledgement of these crimes against humanity. We demand the establishment of legal, institutional, and international mechanisms to advance reparative justice. Reparations must include tangible measures such as debt cancellation, monetary compensation, return of stolen artifacts, institutional reform, and transformative economic redress in the global economic system. Beyond the material loss that Africa suffered, are also the emotional cost to assess. According to the Oxford Dictionary, epigenetics is the study of changes in organisms that are caused by the modification of gene expression rather than the alteration of the genetic code itself. And studies have shown that trauma can be passed down transgenerationally through epigenetics. And so imagine then the various traumas that the people of African descent have faced. Traumas that are being passed down from one generation onto the other. Traumas from yesteryears coupled with traumas of today and the injustices that we are currently facing. What impact does that have on our health? What impact does that have on the health of our children? And most importantly, how do we heal from that trauma? Ghanaian British actress, writer Michelle Cole wrote, "We can put fear of the future in front of us to block us, or put it behind us to drive us forward." As you debate all these questions and ideas, bear in mind that the future is upon us and that the future is African. And like I said at the UN, let me say it louder one more time for those in the back. The future is African. We hold in our hands the power to change the circumstances of our past. But we must be more intentional about our unity than those who oppressed us were about our division. And from the looks of this gathering, I can feel it, that we are more united than ever. And with a united Africa and diaspora, there is nothing we cannot achieve.